Hi, my name is Elijah. I work at the Olean Public Library. This week is National Library Week, so I am going to celebrate it the best way I know how, which is by telling you all about the libraries I visited while I was in London over the summer. There were a few that are very famous and they stand out as having some of the best items to look at. So I've compiled some of my pictures and some pictures from the internet, and we'll take a little tour through my time in London, okay? Here we go. First of all, I'll just give you a little background on why I was in London. It was June of 2019 when I spent 30 days there. It was very cold. It didn't get over 60-ish Fahrenheit for the whole month, except the day that we got there and the day that we left, which was obviously very warm and sunny. Here is a photo of the typical, weather from when I was there. The sun is behind me and the clouds are in front of me. This is a photo taken from my dorm room. I was on the 9th floor of a dorm at the University of Westminster in the center of London. It's right near Regent's Park, right near Madame Tussauds. It's right near Baker Street. And it's beautiful, but it was not great weather the whole time I was there. But this was my view every morning. I would wake up and see this. And so I was there studying abroad through the University of Southern Mississippi. They have a program that takes you to London, and we got to go visit a whole bunch of libraries and also do the classic tourist things. So it was really interesting. So let's get started on our tour. The first is the British Library, which is located right in the center of London, right near Regent's Park, right near where I was, essentially. It is pretty centrally located, and they did that purposely because they believe that the information should be easily accessible to everybody. Let's first talk about the exterior part of the library. This back here is a church. That's unrelated. This part's the library, and this building right here, all this really is the library. They planned to have the building look like a ship. The architect wanted to invoke the metaphor of sailing on the sea of knowledge. So, he made it look like it had the crow's nest right here and the front of the ship and a little porthole, and it's very cool actually. It does not look like a ship on the inside, if you were wondering. It looks like a library. So let's see that the first thing that we toured was a digitization project, which I don't know if you can see at the top here. It says Digital Preservation and Qatar Foundation Partnership, and that was where we first got to go. It's basically just a 10-year collaboration between the Qatar Foundation and the British Library, wherein they take a lot of the materials that don't normally get taken out of the library, like a lot of Middle Eastern, foreign language sort of things, and they actually will digitize them and then send them to the preservation department to have them preserved, and then they get put in archives so that they can be accessed by the website digitally, and they also can be taken out, but it's usually stuff that was not so popular. So let's see. Over here, like I said, is the preservation and conservation section. Each of these is a desk for another person to be doing work. They tried to keep it as natural as possible. They used a lot of where did I put it? Oh, they used Japanese tissue or flour paste to try and keep the materials together. They don't try to make it look exactly as it did before because, that's all part of having knowledge accessible so that you can tell when you take out the item that, this has been altered, and it's to be able to preserve it and keep it in circulation and let people still take it out. This is the philatelic or stamp collection. They have over 9 million stamps in the stamp collection at the British Library. I think it's a really weird thing to collect, but it was cool to see a bunch of the stamps. They're from all over the world, and it's just a little overwhelming, I think, to have that many stamps in one place. In the National Library itself, it has about 200 million items, which might seem like a lot, except when you think about the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. has about 30 times that. So the British Library is sort of their version of the Library of Congress, smaller, even though they have much more of a history, which is really confusing. but whatever. They believe that humanity can only go forward if knowledge is freely shared. So a lot of the collections are available online, are available digitally at bl.uk, which is this website right here. This part of the library, which is actually like right in the middle, like you walk in and this is the first thing you see. It's kind of suspended in the air. You can see there's like 2 to 3 stories of books. It's called the King's Library, and it belonged to King George III. It's his private collection that he donated to the government. And once this building was finished in 1989, they moved it into here, to this beautiful glass case. As you can see, there is a section that says the King's Library, and there's doors. I mean, you need a key card to get in. They don't just let anybody in. You have to work there. The British Library is the 3rd biggest library in the world. 38% of their users are international because, like I said, it's available online, and people will literally come across the world to see this library. It's beautiful. It's fantastic. The items in this library are actually not shelved by the Dewey Decimal System or by the Library of Congress system. They are shelved by height, which actually you can see in this photo. There's a good example. These are shorter books that are all stacked together, and these are taller books that are all stacked together. They do that throughout the whole library, kind of just to save space. It is not my favorite way of organizing, but I don't work there, so it's fine, I guess. The librarians here and the archivists actually don't use gloves when handling any of these items because they believe that gloves will sort of hinder your sense of touch. When you're wearing a glove, you're actually less likely to be careful with the items. So they're just careful with the oils in their hands. That's the biggest issue, but they just want to make sure that everything stays perfectly preserved for future use. This is a list of all of their reading rooms. Obviously, they are organized by subject. So there are some science reading rooms, there is a social sciences reading room, there's a maths reading room, there's a humanities reading room, there's a business reading room. And each of these are completely silent. There's no talking, there's no music, there's nothing. You sit in silence, like a library, sort of. In the entryway of the library, there's also like a little cafe. There's some desks throughout that you can talk at and chat about. Like over here, you can see some of these desks, and these are in the open area, sort of a common area of the library, and you're able to talk through those. I think that's it on that. Yep, so the next one I'm going to talk about is called the Bodleian Library, and it is in Oxford. And as you can see by this map, this over here is London, and you have to take a train to get to Oxford to go to the Bodleian Library. So the thing about Oxford is that it is home to the university, Oxford University, and the university has several colleges within it. So the way that I think about it is like the SUNY system versus a university in the SUNY system. Like I went to Fredonia University, which would be the equivalent of a college in the UK, through the SUNY system, which would be a university. So you can go to Christ Church College at Oxford University. It's confusing, but that's why people in the UK say that they go to university and not college. So let's see, the Bodleian Library. This is the exterior of the library. It is gorgeous. It is so old. It smells old. It's beautiful in there. There's a lot of Harry Potter that was filmed here, interestingly enough. So let's see, a little history of the Bodleian Library. It didn't actually start out as a huge building. It started out as a central library, with 20 books in it. In 1320 is actually when they say the Bodleian was founded. All the books were handwritten because there were no typesets or anything yet. Eventually, Duke Humphrey of the UK donated his library in the 1400s. He did not allow any heat or light in the building because he was afraid that it would start a fire. So it was very cold and very dark most of the time. It was only open from like 10 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon because it was dark the rest of the time. The English Reformation changed the whole contents of the library because the people in charge sort of believed that anything overtly religious or Christian had to be destroyed. So they would throw them out the window the books and set them on fire. So only 5 of those original manuscripts from before the Reformation are still in the library. Just real quick, you can see from this photo, some of these books have like boxes that they're put in. Those are, let me see, sorry, I know what they're called. It's to be conserved. So they're like acid-free bindings for the books. If sometimes, as you can see even in this photo, some of these books have thick spines, and the spines tend to make the book lean back or push against the edge of the shelf, and so they would make these boxes for them so that the weight of the book would be evenly distributed and it wouldn't ruin the binding. Moving on, after the English Reformation, Bodley, a scholar, effectively saved the library in 1602. He added 2,500 books and portraits. The portraits were the founders of the Oxford schools, which included women, surprisingly. The original subjects that were in the library were divinity, lore, and medicine. Those were pretty much the only things that were in this library because they were pretty much the only things that anybody ever studied before that time. Bodley actually got an agreement with publishing companies in the UK and the government, and they agreed to give a copy of every single book published in the UK every year. So they're constantly getting new books because they get a copy of every single book that gets published in the country. And it's still in place, so they keep getting those. This part of the library actually was the Hogwarts library from Harry Potter. The restricted section is down the hall and to the left. I got to go see that. It was very cool. Some of the books are actually attached to the shelves. They don't really use chains anymore. They used to before library cards existed. They would chain the books to the shelves so that you couldn't take them away. And they would just have desks like right here that you could sit at. They did get rid of the chains in the 18th century. It was about a ton of metal that they melted down. And the students actually boycotted the library for a while because they thought that it wouldn't be safe or like a strategic move at all to remove the chains. Acid-free boxes. All the books in the library are able to be used. That doesn't mean that they're able to be taken out of the library, but they are able to be still read, all of the books. There are none of the original books were in English because people believed that English was the peasants' language for a while. So all the books were in Latin, Greek, Hebrew, Chinese, some of those other older languages. They believed this was a big point that they pounded into us. You are never supposed to put your library on the ground floor of a building because of flooding, especially in the UK where it rains like 90% of the time. So actually this building is above the Divinity School, which I'll show pictures of later, but you have to go upstairs to get to this library. The library keeps growing. They have what's called the Western Library, which holds the special collections, and they have a book storage facility about 30 miles away, which holds 9 million books. It has 153 miles of space, and it will be running out of space in the next 3 years. Altogether, Oxford libraries have about 13.1 million items. You got books, paintings, things like that. You can search their libraries online if you just search Solo or search Oxford's libraries online, or you can go to this website down at the bottom, bodleian.ox.ac.uk. They have a lot of their stuff able to be digitally accessed, or they have photos of it, stuff like that. It's very interesting. Oh, so this is the Divinity School I was saying. This obviously is a photo of a wedding, which, like, amazing. I wish that I could be there. This picture is beautiful. This is the room where they shot the dance scene in the 4th movie with Professor McGonagall and Ron dancing really awkwardly in that really giant like speaker. So this is the room where they did that. It's beautiful. It's magnificent. This is the first original building of the Oxford Universities. This one is supposed to be 1 story. But then obviously they built up and built on with the library and the other schools. This was built between 1423 and 1488, this part of the building right here, the Divinity School. And a fun fact, it actually ran out of money to finish. As you can see, it's really ornately decorated on the ceiling, and I have some better pictures here. These are actually seals of families and royals who donated money to have it finished. It's basically crowdfunded. So it's kind of spattered with a lot of seals. These are not uniform in any way. Half the ceiling has them, half doesn't, and then over here there's some, over there there's it's not organized well, but it's because they ran out of money to finish it. So very fun. Let's see. Oh yes, this room is also the infirmary with Madame Pomfrey in Harry Potter. So fun fact. This is the Convocation House. Convocation basically is Oxford alumni, so it's people who want the best for the school. They'll meet in here in like classic dress, robes, and this basically is like the two-side party system, and it's also the room. This room is what Parliament is based on. This is the layout that they use in Parliament in Westminster, London. So it's very cool. Over here on this window are some colored panes of glass, which is what they would use to keep time before clocks and watches. And the next room is the Chancellor's Courthouse, where they would hold court and try students of Oxford if they were breaking the rules, like if they were drunk on campus, or they were late all the time, or if they broke curfew, you would get tried here. And some famous examples are Percy Shelley, the wife of the author Frankenstein, Mary Shelley. Oh, the husband, I called him the wife. Mary Shelley's the wife. Percy Shelley's the husband. He was passing out leaflets on atheism, and he sent them to the heads of Oxford, and he was expelled. Another example is Oscar Wilde, who actually turned up to term 3 weeks late somehow and didn't have the right dress robes. I think he just got in trouble. I don't think he got expelled. Eventually, students protested the archaic ways of the courthouse, and in 1968 it was closed, and they don't use this anymore. They just use a classic disciplinary system now. So that is the Bodleian Library. The next one I want to talk about is Christ Church College, which is a part of the Oxford University. I don't have any lengthy notes on this. I think those got deleted somehow when I got back from my trip. But I will just show you some of the fun things that I saw while I was there. These are some of the books that they have here, some of the manuscripts. This one in the upper left is what they would call a pocket Bible, and it's really small. It was essentially for putting in your pocket. And because the Bible was the most accessible book at the time, it was the most printed. Even the peasants would have a copy, so this would be their copy. They would stick it in their bag or their pocket or whatever and go about their day. The bottom left is some sheet music for choirs. They could have all 4 choir members standing around a table rather than looking over their shoulders because the music is facing all 4 different directions, which is very interesting. And then on the right here, as you can see, this book said ER right here. This is the copy of the Bible that Queen Elizabeth I had made for herself in the 15th century. I think I was not able to find this on their website, but I think that's what it was. As you can see, it's hand embroidered. It's beautiful. It's purple and green sort of, and on the inside everything was handwritten. There were paintings of the scenes and everything. It was truly magnificent. Wonderful. And our tour guide right here who's holding this book, he is one of the librarians of Christ Church. He had the same office that Lewis Carroll had. So we got to see the original first draft of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, which was really cool. Forgot to put the picture up, but it's really neat. The next one we'll talk about is the British Museum, which is in London, back in London again. Let's see, it's right near the Cambridge Theatre, St. Pancras. This is the Royal College of Physicians, St. Peter's Church. That's okay if you don't know any of those because it's London, so it's fine. But the British Museum actually used to be the same as the British Library. They used to be one collective. They separated in 1998. Over some archival differences. The museum sort of believes museum first, archive second, and the library believes the opposite. We don't need to make huge grand displays, we just need to be able to disseminate the information for people. And so they kind of disagreed on that. It was not a huge fight or anything, they just kind of decided to make 2 separate buildings. So this is the outside of the British Museum. It is, again, beautiful, like marble statues and stuff. And the inside looks like this. It has a big round circle in the middle, and then the ceiling is like translucent glass, which brings in a whole lot of light. And you kind of go up these stairs into the museum. This is an upper level. And then all in the back is basically the museum, and you can go into these rooms, and there's different exhibits. Let's see, a little bit of history of the British Museum. It's opened in the 1800s, I believe. They were... Okay, so in 1753 was the original deed for the building, and it was not this building. It was just a really small, like, garden shed, sort of. And they grew from that, essentially. There were collections from a lot of different places. King George III had collections in it. His library is now in the British Library. Fun things. There have been a lot of lawsuits against the museum because of their colonial past. As the UK, they've taken a lot of artifacts from different countries, which protested, and they just kind of kept them. I have some examples later on. Early on in the early days of the museum, children were not allowed. It's my dream. The staff used to live on site. They would have their own housing. There are 3,500 rooms in the museum. They used to have cats that would run around and collect the rodents. They were not on the payroll, but they lived there. They had food there and everything. And then, let's see, we'll go into the round reading room, which is actually closed off to the public. You need to have a fancy lanyard to get in. As you can see, it's just me and my classmates here. Nobody else is in here. This is actually in here. Like, this door right here leads to the round reading room. And it has this huge ceiling, which is paper mache for some reason. Terrible idea, but it sure does look pretty. As for right now, this round reading room is basically just a house for all the archival material that they haven't found a real home for. Their archives flooded in the early 2010s, I think. And so they had to move everything out from there, and then that's when they closed the reading room so that they could house a lot of the archival stuff that was going to be damaged by the flood. So this is extremely disorganized. You can just see like papers all over. There's no rhyme or reason to any of this. It just seems very arbitrary, and they don't get a lot of funding from the government. Mostly the British Library gets most of the funding because they do a lot of the archival work. And so the British Museum is kind of lacking on their archivists or on any sort of resources that they could use to fix this up. So it's just a whole bunch of stuff. Here's a cool sign-in book that I got to look through, and she had it pointed open to the signature right here of Karl Marx in 1874. And then over here, this is the signature of Oscar Wilde in 1879. So that was very interesting. I got to see those. And here I went onto the website. I found some of their more argumentative pieces. On the left, this is a piece from the Parthenon in Athens. It has had there have been so many news stories about it. There have been so many articles, so many opinion pieces about how, they should definitely give it back, or they should be sued, or they should pay Greece money, or something like that, and they just have still, kept their head down and say, well, we've always had this piece, we're going to keep it. And the curator that we had as our tour guide was very passionate about this. And she was saying how Britain deserved these pieces because they had fought for them or whatever. But it's really interesting. And then over here on the right is the Rosetta Stone. The Rosetta Stone that they actually have in there. There's a lot of mummies. They did have a lot of World War II memorabilia that they had to give back to the families or the countries. A lot of Nazi symbolism that they've had to give back, and human remains that they've had to give back. I have here newspaper article that says stolen from the British Museum. They were completely unorganized when they first opened. Nothing was closed off to the public. You could literally walk in and steal stuff. And so this list is 14 different things that were stolen in 1877 that they were like, please just bring these back. We need them for the public. Okay, so that's about it for that. Yep, the next one I have is King's College in London. King's College is a college in the University of London. So it's, again, one of those like university versus college things. It's right here. It's by the Thames River. It's near the Shard. It's near Big Ben. Over here is Regent's University. Barbican. I went there too. So this one, you can see over here, it was built in 1831. It houses the School of Arts and Humanities for the University of London. So we got to go and visit the Foyle Special Collection, which houses 200,000 items, mostly books. They have things from the 15th century all the way to the present day, and they let us touch the items, which was really cool. It was so cool. So let's see some of those that I wanted to show you. Oh, this is the outside here. You can see it's 2 different colors, which, usually means like they started it at one point and they had to finish it with different materials or a different time period later on. But it's beautiful, like always. So gorgeous. And here are some of the items in their collection. Here's the charters of the province of Pennsylvania and the city of Philadelphia, printed and sold by B. Franklin. Who signed it up here? That's Ben Franklin's signature. Ben Franklin. Over here is a copy of Common Sense by Thomas Paine, which basically was an effort to liberate the United States from Britain. And as you can see, some of it is typed up and some of it's written. Basically, that's just the publisher trying to save their butts from any liability against any anti-British sentiments. They would type up parts and then they would send it to a different publisher who would fill in the blanks. The really treasonous sort of, again, anti-British sentiment. It's just that publisher didn't want to be held accountable or held liable for anything if the British government saw that and tried to close them or anything. They would have protections against that. On the right here is a book called America, an accurate description of the New World, containing empires of Mexico and Peru, other large provinces with plantations in those parts. It's a lot of maps in there, but it's basically, when Britain was colonizing the New World, North and South America. Very cool. Some other stuff they had more recently on the left here is a book called Der Anti-Nazi. It's German, and it wasn't really a book. It was kind of like a pamphlet. It wasn't bound so that it would be easily ripped up. There would be no proof if you needed it to disappear. And it was an anti-Nazi sentiment against the regime during World War II. And on the middle on the right, this is all one book, but it was basically a pro-Nazi children's book. As you can see here, there's some anti-Semitic portrait of a Jewish man, and down on the right, there's a Nazi being very friendly to some Aryan-looking children giving a Nazi salute. It's really interesting because it kind of brings up a debate that a lot of librarians have, which is, do you censor material that may or may not be agreeable to a lot of people? Should we leave this available to the public, or should we kind of close it off? But a lot of librarians sort of believe in the power of learning from the past. So normally we will keep these things away from other collections. They're not condoned by the library, but it's still important to be able to learn from those sentiments and those items. So that's very interesting. Anything else about King's College? They had a whole other section about conservation. They showed us some of their old book storage units. It's all metal so that it wouldn't burn. But yeah, they had a lot of things like this. And they had a whole room that was for teaching too. which was very interesting. So that's about it that I have. You saw this slide. But it is National Library Week, so try to find some activities online, find the library at your place instead of finding your place at the library because of the quarantine that we're all under. Check out the Olean Public Library's Facebook page, our website, our Twitter, our Instagram for more activities. It's also National Poetry Month, so we're still trying to keep that going. And it's Earth Day, so enjoy. Try to find some activities, stay busy. And if you have any more questions about my time in London or the libraries, or, I took so many photos. I was a tourist, so I did the classic things that you're supposed to do. I saw Big Ben. I rode on the London Eye. So if you'd like to see any of those, let me know. I'm available. I love doing these. And thanks so much for watching. Have a great rest of your week. Bye.